Well, welcome here. And I want to set your expectations right away, which is we're barely going to cover anything. And this is one of 50, okay? So we're barely going to get started. But let me first give a couple of welcome introductions and talk about the bathrooms are outside and to the left up against the building. There's an exit right back here, one here and one here. Of course, be careful and cautious. I would like to welcome Matt LaVere and Ben Harvey to this panel, and myself, I'm Andy Gilman, the director of the Agora Foundation, and I will be on the council soon, as you know. But the intention of these kinds of panels, if you're not familiar with the Agora Foundation, we started in 1998 doing great book seminars for adults who wanted to continue their education. And we incorporated in 2006 and became the Agora Foundation officially. And we were having panels, for people wanting to read all the great books of the West and the East. And in 2013, we started venturing into this idea of civil discourse on complicated subjects. And especially when we saw how much people thought about so many things. And we thought if we can get people in the room who know their subject well, even if they disagree, get them talking to each other in some informed way. And if some of you know, the late Esther Wachtel came up with this idea of the Ojai Chautauqua, based on Chautauqua, New York, where people come together and learn about all kinds of things. So we had our first panel in 2014 at the Ojai Valley Inn. We've learned a lot over the years, and we've had 35 events since then. And all are recorded, and you can watch them all on the website. And I want to point out, on this table and on the back table, there's an email list. Only if you want to be on the Agora list that you would get a prompt for an event like this. This event's being recorded and it'll be posted there with links on Nextdoor and Facebook and all that. So the idea is this is the very beginning of a conversation around the city and the valley. So hope I've set your expectations correctly there. And I want to thank the Ojai Retreat for hosting this and for Steve Adams for helping to record this event. On your chair, there's a note card, and there should be some pens close by. And in the Agora tradition, if you have questions along the way and you would like us to answer them, write your question out, and Brian's sitting here in the front around 6:30. I'll make an announcement. And I realize I don't have a watch though, Brian, so you can help me out when it's 6:30. And he'll go around and get the questions and pick a couple of indicative ones. And you can move that. Just move the camera, Steve. It's okay. We'll answer probably one or two at the most of those questions, but I will record them all and we'll post them. So look for that. And he has more questions and cards and pens up here if you're interested. So with that, let me talk about some of the things that we learned. First of all, the boundaries of the city and the valley is a very fun, interesting conversation. So when people first move here, they don't understand what those differences are. But when you are driving west, like you're heading into the city, and you're in the valley, you probably see the sign by Villanova School. That's our city limit on the west side. In general, I think I enter the Ojai Valley at Casita Springs, and I think I exit the valley around Koenigstein and Upper Ojai. How's that? Does that sound reasonable enough? I'll just try to think of people. I think at Koenigstein, their address is Santa Paula.
It is.
Yeah. So where would you draw the line?
I grew up in Ojai.
Yeah.
I always thought of the valley basically ending at McCauley's and
Okay.
and in Upper Ojai kind of being another distinct community.
Yeah. And you get the picture. That's a little vague. And then, but in general, it's basically when you pass where Soul Park is and you're driving east right around the lumber yard, that's our other end, that's our eastern boundary. And then we head up to the National Forest on this side. But then on the south side, I always thought it's where Montgomery more or less heads you towards Creek Road. Is that about right? What'd you say?
It's right about that.
Right about that. Okay. So generally people say it's 4 square miles. Now here's another question. I offhandedly say, well, in our 2020 census we had 7,500 people or so in Ojai, but the valley, I just offhandedly say 25 to 30,000.
I think it's 25,000, give or take.
Okay. So we're going to settle on those facts, at least for now. Okay, so then I started asking some more questions around how did this history of the separation begin, and I ended up getting some really wonderful information from people from the Historic Preservation Commission, Craig Walker among them. But a lot of the questions people have right now, I knew about it, but I didn't know how frequent it was, but I'll just read some of the headlines. This is from the Ventura County Star, 1977. This is then-time Mayor Jack Frey talking about a suggestion that the Ojai Valley be consolidated into a single city was rebuffed by the Ojai City Council Mayor Jack Frey, said Wednesday. I won't read the whole article, but basically, the people that don't live in the city don't want the council telling them what to do. That was the main point, and only some of the people are asking to be part of this whole city and not all. You hear that pretty regularly. And what I ended up getting from Craig, some very interesting things. 1980, 1990, 2006, Steve Bennett had a series of valley-wide workshops. I'm going to post that on the website. It's about 150 pages with PowerPoints, with data on all the sides, and it was all, and I lived here and worked here, but I kind of remember that happening, but not really. I was too busy working, but I remember Steve Bennett doing something. In any case, there was a lot of work centered around the Weldon Canyon dump proposal that unified the valley. Obviously, we share the watershed, so we see that geographically and every other way, we're clearly united. No question about that. Then politically, I want to do a little shout out. This book right here, which you can get at the Ojai Valley Museum, the Illustrated Valley, it talks about, this is chapter 13, the neighboring communities. So everything that neighbors Ojai, and what I was very interested to read is that in a lot of those cases, Ojai became a city in 1921, you probably know that, but in a lot of the other cases, while there were people living in places like Miners Oaks and stuff like that, there is sometimes no buildings written about until 1927 or 1929. So we see at least what the brief chapters have on the other neighboring communities is that they may not have had a lot of infrastructure then, and there seems to be a general feeling, according to Craig, that the city unifies the culture in some ways, but those other communities developed over time. So we're not part of one city in part for that reason. But that's even the 30s in Oakview. The very first written instance of Upper Ojai was the restaurant at the Summit in 1928. So we had been a city already for several years. So anyway, those were some really fun, interesting details. There is the kinds of things that Steve was working on. This would have been 2006 and 7. Preserving existing open space in the valley, promoting green building valley-wide, creating an environmental education program, developing an environmental plan for the Ojai Valley that models sustainable community, but also crime. There were some gang issues, I guess, in the 70s that were also trying to be addressed. But other important things like a valley-wide Parks and Rec Commission has been talked about in the past. That still comes up here and there. But if you look at any map, you can kind of see how wide the valley goes and how small the city is. So I found all that to be very interesting information. And most of it is not new. It's what I hear now when people say, why can't I vote? And that's still an issue. And what I'm interested in too, and part of this conversation today, but in general, is how can the people who don't live in the city have a voice in what happens in the city, not in a binding way, of course, but in at least an influential way that we could hear their voice as well. And I hope you will talk about the MAC in a moment. That's one aspect of that, of course. But maybe it could become more robust. And so I don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, but it'd be exploring that conversation to figure out how can people from Casita Springs to Upper Ojai have some way of weighing in on what Ojai decides to do. Let me give you a contemporary example, which I like. The Planning Commission on Wednesday is going to hear a proposal about the Ojai Valley and wanting to expand towards where the winery is and all that. And they have something in their ordinance, which is in the agreement, not to start events during commuter traffic hours. That's something that's already in place. That, to me, is a great example of trying to think through the relationships with our partners well, and because Ojai makes a decision, and if it's a tourist decision, Casita Springs all the way up has to deal with it. So I'd love to figure out how can we work with our neighbors kind of in a more thoughtful way. Thanks for the longer introduction there. I'd like to start with Matt. So if you would talk about the governance structure that the county uses, your area of influence there, and how you see yourself working with Ojai, particularly as the city, but in general the valley. and the map, please.
Well, do I call you mayor-elect? What do I call you?
Just call me Andy.
Andy, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for putting this together. I think since I've known you, that's been one of your strongest talents is the ability to collaborate and to bring people together and to have these types of discussions. So thank you for organizing
My
this.
pleasure.
Thank you, Ben, for joining us. For those of you who don't know, my name is Matt LaVere. I'm sorry, I threw my back out last week, so if I appear stiff, I'm sorry. So I serve as the first district supervisor on the Board of Supervisors. And the first district includes all of the city of Ventura, essentially to the Santa Paula city limits, give or take. I have all of the Ojai Valley, I have all of Upper Ojai, I have all of the National Forest and West Lockwood Valley, all the way out to the Kern County and Santa Barbara County lines. I have about a quarter of Northwest Oxnard, and I have all of the North Coast up to the Santa Barbara County line. And how the county essentially works is, there are some areas where we have jurisdiction countywide. One example is environmental health. We're in charge of managing and kind of the governance over restaurants and environmental health, whether it's in a city or in an unincorporated county. But for a lot of issues, the county only has jurisdiction. A good example of this is like land use and planning. We only have jurisdiction in the unincorporated areas. Projects, businesses, whatever they may be within city limits, cities have oversight and management over those types of issues. So depending on the issue is really where you see county governance versus city governance. But I think for a lot of us in this room probably don't know, I think it says a lot that Ben and I are even sitting here in the same room talking.
Wow.
Because if you don't, I think Ben will second this, is that, up and down the state, cities and counties historically have had fraught relationships. You can just Google it. There's dozens of lawsuits, city versus county, county versus city. There's historically been a challenge in that relationship. I think because of that, there's the arguments, who pays for what, who provides what services, it should be them, it should be us. And it's tough when cities and counties have to kind of share territories and decide who does what, who pays for what. And the easy answer is oftentimes people just make the other entity the bad guy. And it's, that's the bad county or the bad city. And it's leads to just breakdowns in communication, breakdowns in relationships. And it's a struggle up and down the state. And I think it says a lot about us locally, that Ben and I have an open relationship, that Andy and I, as the new mayor, have an open relationship. There's channels of communication. And that is why you don't, I think, see a lot of what you're seeing other places of the state, where it's constantly making the other entity the bad guy. I have a lot of respect for Ben, I have a lot of respect for Andy, and a lot of that comes down to the trust that we've built among us. And so I think it's important, because a lot of people don't understand how historically fraught cities and county relationships can be, and we don't have that here. And I think that's a real start for us when it comes to what we're going to talk about tonight, and some of the challenges we face and how we work together to solve them.
Will you talk about the advisory committee, that map?
Sure. And I don't know when it was started. I think it was actually Supervisor Lacey who started it, but we have an Ojai Valley Municipal Council. Supervisor Lacey was the supervisor for 20 years before Supervisor Bennett. And we have a 5-member body. Brian Akins is on there. I don't know if there's any other. Marilyn's here. We have 2 of our Ojai Valley Municipal Advisory Council members here. And how the map was formed was when there is going to be land use decisions within the Ojai Valley that are going to have impacts, we want to bring it to the Ojai Valley MAC first for review and for analysis and for comment. And so whether it's a new restaurant like the Habit, when it opened up, that first went to the Ojai Valley MAC. And as simple as the car wash in Miramonte wanted to make some changes, that went to the MAC. And then larger housing projects in the valley will go to the MAC. Anything land use related, the county starts by bringing it and giving a full presentation to the Ojai Valley Municipal Advisory Council for comment. That comment and direction is then given to the Ventura County Planning Commission as they make their decision on a project. And then ultimately, the MAC advice and the Planning Commission advice is what we as supervisors get when we make the final decision.
And how many people are on that committee?
It's a 5-member body.
And is it meant to be geographically diverse, is that the intention?
That was my intention, because, you know, we never know where a project's gonna pop up in the valley, in the unincorporated valley. We don't see city, projects within the city limits, we don't see. That will go straight to the city planning commission. But we have, Brian is from Oakview, Maryland, I believe you're from Oakview too, or Miramonte. We have somebody who lives on Creek Road, we have, somebody in Casita Springs, and we have somebody in Miners Oaks.
Okay.
So I've tried to make it a geographically diverse board.
And it's only advising, not
It's-
binding?
It's nothing binding, purely advisory.
Okay. No, thanks, I appreciate
And
that.
I should also say, we did that, sorry to.
No, please.
One thing I saw when I took office was a need in the Oakview community to have a little more specific voice in what's happening in the valley. And so I formed it's not a municipal advisory council, we call it just an advisory council, the Oakview Advisory Council.
Of
And-
which is what I'm on,
Yeah.
I'm not on the Oakview, Ojai Valley Municipal
not, that's right.
Advisory Council, so.
Yeah, you're on the
you-
ODAC.
Now you're on
Yes.
my commission.
Yes, good, sorry. So what we did is, this committee explores things beyond just land use. The Ojai Valley map is just land use.
Okay.
But when it comes to recreational opportunities, when it comes to anything impacting Oakview, we try to take it to the Oakview Advisory Commission.
Okay.
And they have a similar role as the Ojai Valley map in terms of helping me understand what the community needs are, what their wants and desires are.
Okay.
And it's really been helpful to me, for something Oakview specific.
But the county would still decide something that happens in Oakview finally?
Correct, because
Okay.
Oakview is unincorporated.
Okay, thank you. Ben, if you would talk about your role in the city, for anybody who doesn't know, and what your area of purview is, your interest, and then how you see yourself working with the county, or the city working with the county, and you specifically.
Sure, so I'm city manager for the city of Ojai. I'm not city manager for Ojai Valley, I'm not city manager for any area that's unincorporated. I'm appointed by the city council, and I know one of my bosses, my current bosses, is in the back. Councilman Leslie Rule is back there hiding.
Andy Whitman's in the back over there
No,
too.
two of them, Mayor Pro Tem Witness, yeah, okay, they're everywhere.
Not quite around here.
And then, of course, the mayor-elect will be joining us, as he pointed out, on the 10th of December. So I am appointed to run the day-to-day operations of the city. I am not a policymaker. I'm a policy implementer. So the major contracts, notably from the county, we have county sheriff for our police services, et cetera. Those fall under my jurisdictions, as well as community development, parks and recreation, finance, et cetera. So it's the day-to-day, it's the streets and all the unsexy in Ojai, that's under my jurisdiction. I've been a city manager, this is my third city where I've been a city manager. They've all been small cities. Avalon on Catalina Island, Pacific Grove in Monterey County, and now Ojai here in Ventura County. And I bring that up because I've always been in a David and Goliath situation, and dealing with seemingly large county organizations, and it always struck me that it was a better path to cooperate than to combat. And I was lucky enough to step into this job with Supervisor LaVere, and we struck up a partnership right away. It doesn't mean that we're always on the same side of an issue. There are often times when we're not, but that's okay. Like the supervisor pointed out, we have mutual respect and an understanding of what we're here to do. We have to stay in our own swim lane sometimes, but we always try to somehow figure out a solution if we can. Celebrate one that we had here earlier, and I don't mean to stir up a hornet's nest, but we successfully were able to put together a brand new pickleball court at a county park. That's a city installment on a lease to the county that's available for anyone to use. So that's a victory we achieved together. I'll shut up for now.
No, that's good. And you said something before that tell me if I'm remembering it incorrectly. The city sees the county as kind of a peer relationship partner. We're not underneath the county in that regard, or are we?
Well, we're both.
Okay, we're both.
Yeah, we're both. It depends on when it's convenient for us.
Or is it the way that Matt said? So, for example, like restaurant, like county health is looking at a
Oh,
restaurant.
we're absolutely under the county for county health.
Understood.
Yes.
But then
No,
there's some
it-
ways that you're peers. That we're peers.
Yes, in all seriousness, you know, the health-related matters, that's a very serious matter. We do not have a city health department, we do not have a city health director. So absolutely, we rely upon the expertise of the county, and that's one of the things I frequently get from local businesses, restaurants in particular, you know, why am I being asked to do this, that, or the other? Well, it's a county health requirement, and they're usually there for very good reasons, and doesn't mean I can't assist. I mean, I can reach out to the county and ask questions and try to find out if I can facilitate something. You know, when we had an issue not too long ago with a water break, right, with the local water district, but the county had to certify when the water was safe to drink. So my relationship was more of a go-between, trying to explain why we were doing things and why it was important and so on and so forth. Emergency services are really one of our big areas where we rely upon the county, not only the sheriff, where we have a direct contract for police services, but also where we don't have a direct contract, and that's through the fire. As the property owners in the room will know, that that's something that you all are paying for, but we benefit from as a city, and I benefit from as city manager. Our division chief treats me as if I'm one of his bosses, even though he has absolutely no responsibility to me, but he interacts with me on that type of level, which is very nice for all of us here. And we get a great level of service from all of our county partners. It really is one of my most, if not my most important relationship. We can't deliver service here without the county, and that's the truth.
No, thanks. I got reminded of something by Michael Flood, the director of Casitas. So we have all of these, if you were to look at a map with overlapping responsibility areas, you think there's the city and the county, but you think Ojai Unified School District goes way beyond the city, but it stays within the valley, of course. And then we see Casitas that goes way outside of the valley, all the way to Mills, for example. And then we see the county and we see our sheriffs and all that kind of stuff. What Michael Flood reminded me of was, I was having the feeling like, well, we have this great groundwater basin and we have the lake that we built with Ventura, and I'm very happy that we have this backup. And I was feeling kind of territorial and not wanting to connect to anything else and hoard. And Michael reminded me that we're all in this together. I didn't say those words, but he could see the gleam in my eye, about my hoarding gleam. And he said, really, it's all about we're there for each other, taking care of each other. And that was really the right principle. I thought that if somebody needs us as a neighbor, we're going to be there, and we're going to call on them when needed. So I thought we would have 3 subject areas possibly today, see what we can get through. And I expect you to write more, and we'll keep having more conversations with more panelists. We'll have other council members on here who are willing to do that. But one I would love to pick up on, if it's okay, would be Soul Park. So you mentioned the pickleball courts, and if you ever get a chance, I have it, and maybe I'll put it on the website, but the bequest from Zadie Soul, it's really fun to read. It's actually a kick. And you can see what she was intending, and that it went to the county and so on. But so what we have been reading about in the paper recently is, besides the pickleball courts, is we saw that the county was interested in not being negative revenue-wise on the park, and then there was some talk about having campers in the back, and I'm sure you got an earful from every Ojai resident. And so maybe this is a good place to talk about that, is how would a decision like that come, how was the interest come about, and then a decision be made when you're working with the residents here that surround the park?
Let me start with this. RV parking is not coming to Soul Park. Done, signed, done.
Okay, guys, see you later. Talk to you later.
Yeah, and I think that situation was not handled well from the start. And I don't want to place blame on anybody. For those, I'll try to make this quick. Our parks department at the county is an enterprise fund, and that means it has to support itself. It doesn't have any general fund support. I mean, so our park department relies on camping fees, gate fees, grants, and I think it's 47 or 48% of the entire county parks budget is funded by camping on the Rincon. And, our parks director was kind of given, some encouragement from his boss over General Services Agency to figure out ways to make the park department more sustainable. And the first thing that came to his mind was camping, because it's such a large basis of our current budget. But unfortunately, the thought of RV parking at Soul Park the cat got out of the bag before any kind of what I would view as proper outreach took place. And what was, a concept kind of became known in the public sphere as a directive. And obviously I heard from dozens and dozens and dozens of people in the valley who are adamantly opposed to it, and I completely understood why. And I was able to talk with our parks director, and I think everyone was in agreement that it wasn't a good idea, and so it's not happening. But typically in a situation like that, how I see those types of situations from a county perspective is that anything we do at Sewell Park is going to have impacts on the city, because in most cases, to get to Sewell Park, you have to go right through the city. You can go the back way, but I think most people would come through the city. And so in those types of situations, it's always my way of doing things is I would call Ben, I would call the mayor, and we would talk about it. Just so I had a full picture of unintended consequences, impacts, things that, they know the city better than I do. And it's important for me to hear from them on situations like this. So if RV parking was something there that I was really excited about, which I'm not, I would call Ben, I would call the mayor and talk about it. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this, am I missing something? Here's why I think it's good. What do you think? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Why? Let's talk about it. And so, at Soul Park, Ben mentioned pickleball. I think Ben and I's relationship is that, if there's any way that I can help him, support the council, I want to do that. And Ben, Ben was the one who came up with the ideas, why don't we look at Soul Park for pickleball? And he called me, I said, great idea, let's figure it out. And because of that relationship we have, the communication, the city was able to make something great happen. They're beautiful courts. I think it turned out great. But that's typically, to answer your question, it's a long way of saying is, whenever there's anything that I'm dealing with that's not city related, but it's going to have city impacts, it's important for me to have communication beforehand.
Well, I was just gonna encourage the supervisor to take some credit. We were able to build the court because you directly inserted one of your chief deputies into the process to make sure, Clint, actually hand-walked the application up to planning so that it would get reviewed and approved. So it definitely was a collaborative effort, and it was, take some credit. That was something that could have taken 2 years, and we did it under 9 months. So.
And as far as the Soul Park campers in the back, apparently it's a done deal now, which is great, but what was the relationship that the city had in the midst of that? Obviously, we were all reading about it in the paper, but you must have been getting feedback as well.
We were, and so, we understand the pressure that the Parks Department at the county is under. Like the supervisor said, it's an enterprise system, so they have to eat what they kill, basically. And so we get that. That's tough. And we have a great relationship with the director. Doesn't mean we always agree on every single thing, but we have a working relationship. And so we just, I think it's always important to stick to process and policy and procedure, and so we just tried to simply say, like, hey, according to what we're seeing, this type of use might not be allowed, but let's talk about that. Maybe there's a different type of use that you want to explore, et cetera, et cetera. As soon as you come out as some type of hardliner on something, the next week you're going to step in something yourself. So it's just you need all the friends and collaborators you can find in this line of work.
And I think real quick, it also goes to the city council supervisor relationship. I saw Leslie back there, Councilmember Rule, and she called me and said, hey, can we get coffee? And we got coffee, and she explained to me all of the feedback she was getting, because it was important for her to let me know what her constituents, what Ojai residents were feeling about it. And that's really important that I hear from the city manager and the council to get a true feeling for what people in the city are thinking about different projects.
I appreciate that. I didn't say I was going to talk about this, but it's not going to be too critical. Tell me if I'm remembering it incorrectly. I wanna say 2016, 15, 16, maybe going into 17, we were having a big conversation around short-term rentals in our city. And we now have evolved to the ordinance where it's, minimum 30 days, and that's where we're settling, and it seems to be holding and good. But then tell me if I'm remembering this wrong, the Unincorporated Valley followed suit after that, or you tell me how you recall it.
It was before both of us.
Oh, okay.
My understanding, and I don't know who went first, but my understanding was that it was important that the city and the Ojai, and the city and the county have similar rules.
Yep.
And they both adopted similar ordinances,
Okay.
so there was no confusion.
No, thanks. That's more or less how I remember that. Okay, let me move to the next subject, which is traffic. And there's a couple of things to think about traffic. One is sort of what I alluded to a minute ago, which is if the city of Ojai decides to do something tourist related or something like that, obviously all the cities leading up to it deal with it. I was thinking of some specific things such as, if you remember Ojai Day, not the last one, but the one before, and Caltrans was working on Ojai Avenue the day before Ojai Day. And I remember thinking, if there were a relationship there that were better, I know Ben, that precedes you, if there were a relationship there that were better somehow, or whatever happened, something didn't happen the way we would like. And so I thought, well, how does the relationship between what Caltrans wants to do and what the city faces, how does that communication work? And then I thought of Caltrans talking to itself. For example, we had the road blocked on 150 heading to Santa Paula, and then we see a lot of road work happening out of the valley, so essentially our main arteries out of the valley are both blocked. So the long way of asking the question is, how does the city work with Caltrans or the Unincorporated Valley Road Improvements? Either one of you guys.
Well, so again, that's even a bigger entity that we're dealing with when you're dealing with Caltrans. I think the important thing to keep in mind, you do have options. Caltrans will give you one of their roads, absolutely. They will give it to you. You then have to maintain it to their standards in perpetuity there forward. So that's what we keep in mind. We could take over Ojai Avenue, but it would be very, very expensive, and we quite frankly don't have the men, machines, or money coming in to do that. So with that mindset, you understand pretty quickly that it's again another bees to honey type situation where you're trying to work collaboratively, because that's how you're going to get results, and that's the only way you're going to do it, and build relationships and deliver for them, and then maybe they will remember that at a time when you need it. But that's really how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how does communication happen, though? In other words, how does the city learn about what Caltrans is working on?
So one of the things I've tried to implement since coming here are what we call, for lack of a better term, like a quarterly utility stakeholder meeting. So it's everybody. It's Caltrans, it's the major utilities, it's the secondary utilities. So we all talk about the projects that we're doing and that we want to do, so that we avoid paving a street, hopefully, and then the next day cutting into it. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't happen, because that does happen, but we try to at least avoid that from happening. So there's no magic to it. It's just what you think. It's sitting down on a regular basis, having contacts, having people you can call, discussing what you want to do and how you're going to do it, and seeing if there's a conflict or a way you could do things together. Maybe you've got something where you can all jump in the trench that you're digging, and that will be beneficial. It doesn't always work, but you try to do that.
Right. So can I talk a little bit about, this has come up a few times, but traffic, let's say coming through Creek Road, for example. I know sometimes Google tells people to go on Creek Road. Is that something that the county, your office can help with, getting people onto the main road?
To a certain extent. I mean, we obviously don't control or manage Google, Waze, a lot of the online apps that people use these days. I know Steve Bennett had sent letters to Google and Waze. My office has now sent 2 letters to Google and Waze, trying to educate them on some of the traffic patterns we're seeing on Creek Road, trying to get them to keep people on the main road. We haven't had any luck yet, but it's it's tough, because try sending a letter to Google and getting a response.
I understand. You don't know that I'm going to ask this question, but it's related and it's not critical. Is the rest of the county seeing the problem with e-bikes that Ojai is seeing, and are other people working on some way to address that issue?
I can speak to Ventura.
Yeah.
They're seeing it there too. Ojai, Ventura, Ojai. I know a lot of local police departments are doing their best to start educational platforms to try to educate both youth and parents on safe e-bike riding, following rules of the road, wearing helmets, and I talked to some of our emergency room doctors and nurses at BCMC, and they're seeing dozens and dozens and dozens of people come in because of e-bike accidents, so it's a real concern.
It comes up for me in my conversations almost every day. And every time I drive through town, I see a kid doing a wheelie. And it's impressive, but I'm worried about them.
Well,
Yeah, good.
could I offer a thought
Please,
on that?
yeah.
Education's very important, but, as somebody who was a kid myself at one point, enforcement is probably more successful. And we have 2 sheriff deputies at any moment in Ojai, but, they're mostly responding to calls for service because that's their primary function. And if somebody calls 911 and you don't sit there and, are you sure it's serious? I mean, could we come in half an hour, an hour? It's like, no, you expect them to go when they can. So if you don't have some sheriff deputy that's dedicated to an important function like traffic enforcement, you are going to see people violating the rules. It's just how it goes, especially kids. I mean, they think they're gonna live forever, right? And that's how it goes.
No, thank you, I appreciate that. No, thanks. The third issue, Brian, what time is it?
It is 6:12.
Thank you. This is the most complicated one of the 3 potentially, but the encampment that's at Kent Hall right now, it's on everybody's minds, of course, and it's something that I'm imagining 2025 that's gonna be a central issue for the council that we'll be working on. And what comes up a lot is what's the county's responsibility for the folks who are there? There's a lot of conversation around that. I can say, and some of you have heard me say, I went to school with somebody who's there. A lot of the people there are the census recently is by far the vast majority are Ojai Valley residents. They didn't, fly in or whatever, but there's so many questions, and I don't want to talk about the details of the encampment because it's way beyond the scope of what we can do here today. Just one very particular point, which is what sometimes comes up is what's the county's financial responsibility, or in the continuum of care, what's their responsibility if somebody, let's say they live in the unincorporated valley, they come to the city and the encampment that we're working on, and then maybe the more permanent structure we build. How does that relationship, what's the vision for that relationship? And I realize this is a work in progress and it's complicated. And you fill in what I'm missing, you guys.
I guess we can look at this, very granular at, the Ojai tent cabin village right now, or, at a more macro level, is just homelessness in general. What's the city-county relationship? And I know in Ojai, it's a hot topic. I'll tell you right now, it's a hot topic in every city in the county. You're not alone. And every city is dealing with their own different types of homeless challenges. And oftentimes, these encampments end up in city limits. Is every resident of those encampments in the city, from the city limits? No. Oftentimes for Ojai, there's probably people from the unincorporated Ojai Valley. I hear about this all the time in Ventura. It was a challenge when I was on city council. Ventura is the county seat. We have the county jail, we have the county hospital. And so oftentimes when people get arrested, they go to the hospital, they're discharged, and they're in Ventura. Most of them are not from Ventura, but they're there, and so what do you do about that? And I know in Ventura, when I was on city council, that you had the choice of, just being mad about it and putting your head in the sand and doing nothing, because it's not fair, or doing something. And the council at the time said, listen, we understand that all of these people aren't from Ventura, but they're here now. And they're impacting the lives of all residents. And so we have to do something. And at that time when I was on city council, Steve Bennett was supervisor, and he led something at the county level which said, listen, cities, it's probably better, rather than us build shelters in random parts of the county, in the unincorporated county, we think it's better that we wanna be your financial partner in whatever you choose to do to address homelessness in your city. And Supervisor Bennett at the time came up with a program with the support of the full board that, you know, the county would be a 50-50 partner with any city that wanted to provide services to homeless in their community. And I think it was, you know, a brilliant stroke of policy by Supervisor Bennett to start that program. It's still in place. Ventura used that partnership to build its homeless shelter. They've used that partnership to expand more permanent supportive housing units. And it's open to any, Oxnard's taking advantage of that, Thousand Oaks is taking advantage of that. And I know, I'm looking forward, you know, the city has also reached out to, the City of Ojai is interested in figuring out how they too can partner with the county to address the homeless challenge in the city. And I'm all for it. It's so easy to start placing blame when it comes to really difficult situations like homelessness. And it's so much more effective to actually collaborate, talk, and work together.
And then before, Ben, I wanna hear from you, but can I ask about Mesa? So Mesa being in an agricultural area, is that a SOAR exemption because it's workforce, or is it because of homelessness, or what is it?
No, it's a state housing law, that the state, and we could have a whole nother Chautauqua on state housing laws. I mean, the state has come forward with a lot of housing policy, which essentially guts local control. And
We've seen that here.
yeah, and if you want to build purely affordable housing in the state right now, anywhere in the state, you can almost do it by right. There's very little county control oversight if you're building a 100% truly affordable project. And obviously Mesa is the biggest fan in the world of what Mesa's doing. I see Dan right there. Dan's one of my favorite people in the world.
Oh, is Dan here? Oh yeah, there is.
When Dan pitched me on the idea of Mesa, I thought, gosh, he's so smart, he's so passionate, he's onto something. And you could see on the final product, it's amazing what he was able to do in 2 short years. But yeah, if they had home key funding to help secure the property, and because it's 100% truly affordable housing, there's exemptions from local zoning control, and it was able to be done.
Thanks. Yeah, Ben, what do you think? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is about the city's relationship and asking the county for help with our situation right now.
Yeah, we're asking for help. I was telling the supervisor when I got here, we're currently in negotiations with Ventura County Behavioral Health because we're trying to implement a multidisciplinary team case manager, first in OTT, Ojai Tent Town, and then if the council decides to move forward with the Cabin Village, it would move over to that. We have a nonprofit in place at OTT currently. It's Ames Wise at St. Francis Challenge, and that's been good, and that's stabilized things considerably. But what we've realized is we need somebody really from the county who has access to every single county service, because all the folks in OTT in general need some type of county assistance. If it's simple and it's just basic medical care, fine. If it's some type of mental health, fine. If it's some types of substance abuse assistance, et cetera, those are all in general. Those are county services, and it's easier to connect people to county services if they're a county employee. So that's a way that we see really things improving even further at OTT. And if the council decides to move forward with the Cabin Village project, that would be a key component of that.
So, and I'm not trying to put you guys on the spot. I'm truly trying to have a very serious, honest conversation. There has been some talk of not being happy with that location by some in this very room right now. Of course, we all know that. But there has been differing kind of views around whether or not the funding could be used for a unincorporated valley site or not, right? So on the one hand, some have said, well, we were looking for an outside of the city limits site in the beginning, right, when we were looking at the honor farm and things like that. Then we had heard from some folks that it has to be in the city limits. So maybe just some clarity around that.
Can I start?
Sure.
I want to. I can only imagine your frustration.
Well,
it's no, because and I say that because dealing with the state can be really difficult.
Yeah.
And it's even more difficult when you hear different things from different people and the story changes. And so I can only imagine, I'll let you go, but I can only imagine your frustration in dealing with this.
So I think, unfortunately, Andy, we're going to take a step back so that it makes sense.
Please.
Okay, so the city council directed staff to submit a grant application, an encampment resolution fund grant application, okay? And in that application, we specified that the existing homeless encampment, because that's what the money is for, is to convert an existing homeless encampment into housing. So the application stated it was going to be at Kent Hall. And in that application, we specified that we could construct up to 20 units, and there'd be a communal area for showering and for bathrooms and for the kitchen, et cetera, et cetera. So, after we were awarded the grant and contacted the state, we were advised, yes, well, you can revise your application and you can tell us that you'd like to do it at a different location, but it's gonna have to provide better, greater or better services, or be closer proximity to services, et cetera, et cetera. So, in other words, you can't come to us, this is the state talking, and say, this is a politically charged location, we'd like to build it over here, and we're gonna not provide 20 units, we're gonna provide 15. Or we're even gonna provide the same number. They said, if you're gonna change your location, you're gonna have to increase it and make it closer to services such as transit, shopping, et cetera, et cetera. That's the requirement. With that said, I don't mean to open up something here, but there was some discussion of trying to, use a county location for that. Candidly, the state was less excited about county locations that were further outside of town. They also pointed out that the grant award was to the City of Ojai. It wasn't to the County of Ventura or Unincorporated Ventura County. But that's kind of the general idea of how it works, and it's been a work in progress. We were connected at first directly with the governor's office, with the homelessness czar, who was telling us one thing, and then we later were informed, okay, no, it's actually under this other state department, and we finally got in touch with the grants chief who oversees our grant, and that's been a great relationship, and she's been very candid and clear. But they do have to review and approve. If the council decides to make a change, it's going to have to go through them for review and approval.
So just to reflect what I think I heard you say, it isn't that an unincorporated area is off the table, but it would have to be a clear benefit and better than Kent Hall or the location. And the location right now, the South Signal location, has been approved by the state, or no?
So we've been in communication along the way with the state, and they understand this process, and they understand that we're going through the planning commission right now, and that ultimately we'll come back to the city council for a recommendation. And they understand that we won't be revising our application unless the council gives us direction to do so.
Okay. I see that as complicated. And I also see that there's a challenge wherever it's going to be. In a way, the Mesa example, I did hear from a neighbor next to Mesa saying, I hate that it's there, it's gonna bring down all the property values, but whatever, that was a voice or two. But not to say that should be discounted, but meant to say there's no location that's perfect. I completely get that. But no, thanks for saying that. And I was in the room with the council when they voted on the grant, and I do remember Jen Harkey, the grant writer, saying you can definitely change the location. I do recall that clearly. So that the idea was that the location was nobody was thrilled about Kent Hall at the time. I remember that. But anyway, okay, so that's where we're at. So it seems like there will be much more. We're going to hear from the planning commission when they do go back and go there. The council will hear it again. And many people in this very room are concerned about the location. But if somebody else were to, so for example, when you say that the county does a partnership with cities and pays for half, how does that financial help work in this situation?
Well, in this situation, there's encampment grant money that's going to pay for the development of the property. Where a city-county partnership would probably work is in the ongoing operation.
I see, okay.
Of the of the housing.
So to be determined, like that's something that we would work on with you guys.
I mean, there's obviously annual ongoing maintenance and operational costs with these projects, you know, services and whatnot. And that's where the city and county can come together and you know, there'd be a 50-50 partnership where we don't think the city should be completely on the hook for providing the services for years after year, for year after year after year.
Okay.
We want to be there and be a partner and making sure that we support what the city's trying to do with their own unique needs.
That's really great to hear, because you know, a lot of what, even talking about the campers at Soul Park, for example, a lot of chatter could end if a conversation like this happened weeks ago. And so I guess I think we need more of these kinds of things, where we can have these kind of conversations more frequently, so then everybody's on the same page. And I'll publish this; it'll probably be in the paper. So, because I realized there was a lot of wheels spinning around just the campers at Soul Park, and then this issue would be good too. So, if you have a question, you can pass it forward. Brian's going to walk around. If you want to move it to the center aisle, he will take your questions. And he will sort them and bring a couple up here. Only if you have one. If you don't have one, no problem. And then you'll hand them up, and we'll try to address one or two of those. Thank you, Brian. Well, since we have a moment now, we actually got through a couple of those a little faster than I imagined. I would like to ask about, we're all talking about fire, and I'll mention two things that I forgot to mention before. One is, in this room on Sunday, this coming Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m., the Fire Safe Council, Chris Dance is right here, will be hosting an event all related to homeowners insurance and fire. What are the trends happening from Sacramento on down? So that'll be something that's, again, will be an ongoing conversation with the Fire Safe Council, with Agora, talking about fire, so that's that. And then what I also didn't mention is that we're going to be kicking off a series of panels, probably at Matilla Auditorium, on the future of Ojai. And the first panel that we have envisioned for February is what makes Ojai Ojai. That'll just be a fun one. So we're going to have younger people, older people, and a nice cross-section of what makes Ojai special. So that'll be our first one. But we're thinking of those every other month for the entire year. What's particular about Ojai and what is Ojai facing? But one thing I'd love to talk about is fire. And so, related to the Fire Safe Council's event that's going to be on Sunday, but how does the county and the city work together, like let's say during the Thomas Fire, or what did we learn from the Thomas Fire? That would be another great question. But obviously disasters don't stay within political boundaries, so how does that, how did the communication work there?
During the Thomas Fire?
Sure, or during the Thomas Fire, and then what's going to be different? And I know we're all working on it.
You know, I wasn't at the county during the Thomas Fire, so I'm not sure about the communication then. I think Ben mentioned it, is, you know, we have a division chief, Ventura County Fire Department Division Chief, Barry Parker, who really views his job as the fire chief for Ojai. And he wants to have that kind of direct line of communication with city government, city management, with city elected leadership, to where people in the valley view him as their fire chief, and he's that ingrained in the community. And so that when it comes to emergency preparedness, when it comes to actual disasters happening, there's that line of communication. It all goes back to communication. So Barry Parker's an amazing guy. I know he's at a lot of council meetings, and so that we kind of view that as he's kind of that source of go-between between the county fire and the city.
No, thanks.
So, you know, I wasn't here during the Thomas Fire, obviously, but I think one of the big takeaways that I've heard about is communication, like we're just talking about. We try to remind folks that the county is our first responder emergency partner, not only for fire, but for police. And so rather than making up our own communications when there is an emergency, we try to direct everybody to BC Emergency using, you know, BC Alert. And so to that end, we're going to have another city-wide newsletter coming out in January. One of the things we're trying to do is make a refrigerator magnet sticker, something both to go along with that. Just slap that on the side of the fridge. People can be reminded to sign up for these things. That's really the key thing, because with an emergency, you don't know exactly what it's going to be, where it's going to be coming from. So it's not the type of thing where you can say, oh, you know, in an emergency, we want you to all gather at the high school. That might be a terrible location depending on what has happened. What we want you to do is to pay attention to what the county is telling you, to do and what the situation is. So that's really kind of the important takeaway.
Right. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so here's 5.
Okay.
Go get some more cards.
Okay, thanks.
You're in the back.
Okay, sorry about that.
Closer to the mic. Can you hear him now? If he puts it up closer?
Sorry.
That's okay. No, what happened during the Thomas fire was a lot of us were using Facebook also as our main communication. And it wasn't clear what to do always, but, so I think that's going to also be one of the huge, thank you.
This one's for Matt.
Okay, perfect. That's going to be one of the main things that we're going to be working on, I think, this whole coming year would be what the resiliency centers that are being proposed, what are the plans going to be, what's the communication strategy, it's on everyone's mind. And it hit me a few months ago, all the things that we talk about, like pickleball or anything else, they're all gonna be moot if fire gets into the city. And if you remember, some of you were at the fire safe, or the fire panel in 2019, where our chief, John McNeil, pointed out that the fire was coming down this mountain, I believe on the Thursday or whatever day it was, and then the wind ended up changing going west. And that was the main reason why it didn't come into the city. All the other contributing factors, irrigated fields, yes, absolutely, but the wind changing was the main factor, and that's not something we can count on, obviously. So that's something that we don't want to have to do. Okay, can there be, here's one question from the audience. Can there be designated on Ojai Avenue can there be a designated officer on Ojai Avenue for monitoring enforcement on peak tourist days, Saturday and Sunday in town? So street crossing bikes and e-bikes.
Yes. Yeah, you just have to, that would be an additional, service that you need to contract with for the county, but that would be something that would be typical for a contracted traffic enforcement motor officer. The chief of police, Chief Newman, great chief here in town, would direct that resource based upon, the city policy. Something like that for traffic enforcement, you can say, hey, I'd like somebody to be over here, we're noticing a problem, and that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
But if you don't have somebody that's able to do that, and you have two people that are just chasing their tails doing calls for service all day, you can't have them sit out there because they're gonna be peeled off in an instant.
Camarillo just did that, so this Ben said it's possible.
Okay. No, that's good. So it would be, that would be a council action.
It not only council action, but an additional expenditure that you would be adding to your sheriff contract.
Right, which is a very expensive item at the moment.
It is, but I'm just gonna jump in on that, having been places where we have our own police department, it's a fraction of the cost if you had your own department, and you don't have any of the other compounding labor issues that often come with having your own police department.
Right, I get that. This is related. Do city road projects include level of service ratings for traffic?
Do city road, in other words, are we bringing it up to the highest standard possible? Is that the question? Maybe the person is asking this question.
Yes.
Yes,
For example, I've been here 30 years, and every few years they add another stop sign, like 40 feet from another stop sign, we just stop that. And I'm an engineer, and I did transportation in my engineering, and I work for Caltrans for this.
Okay.
And any study for traffic, you have, not only you look at alternatives for traffic, but you also look at the level of service, A, B, C, D, right? So if traffic is flowing, you don't want to stop it every 40 feet. But so many places in town, like these stop signs, they just drive you crazy. Let alone a lot of the lights that they put over the years was because of lawsuits. Old granny guys crossing the street, family sues, car transport. So my question is, what are you considering the level of service?
Okay, I understand the question better.
Some of these are even easier. Like if you go from the main road to Baldwin to turn right, you could add a little lane for people to turn right instead of way down that line for 10 minutes in the morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so the city does have the jurisdiction through a legislative action of the city council to install additional stop signs, as you're pointing out. The city is able to do that, and they're not required to first conduct a speed study or a traffic study in doing that. They can, but they're not required to. I think that's the short answer.
So
There
you're
was
not
something.
required to do anything, so if your stop
Sir,
sign.
sir, if I can, I just want, give me the short version so we can move on.
Yeah, so if your additional stop sign causes a negative impact, then what?
Well, again, I'm gonna leave my answer with, legislatively, the city is able to install additional stop signs. Is it a requirement to do a speed study or to have a traffic engineer as part of that? No, it's not. You can do that, it's not required.
Well, I can answer you in one way, which is, I know the council does this somewhat, but I would love it to be procedural, where every time something is passed, I would love there to be, we tick it on the calendar that we look at it in 6 months or some reasonable period and say, is it meeting the intention? Does it need to be revised? I would love to do that, have it
Well,
be.
and I can jump in.
Please go.
As easily as the city council is able to install a stop sign, they can also legislatively remove that.
Yep. Okay, sure. This is another traffic-related one, but this is gonna be for Matt. Creek Road residents, they're asking for reduced speed limit to 30 miles an hour, stop signs at Encino, Kenowa, and Camp Comfort, bike and pedestrian paths, bike access from Camp Comfort to the Ventura Bike Trail, and end to fatal traffic accidents every single month. So I don't know if all those are correct, but what I would say is, it obviously, people do speed on there, we know that. And so, is that something that the county can look at improving?
If you travel Creek Road, you probably noticed that last year the county did some traffic calming measures,
Yeah.
particularly around the residential communities, Kiowa and some of those similar streets down there. And they put a median in, which is kind of a visual reminder to slow down. We did some speed studies after those traffic calming improvements were done. We actually changed some of the coating on the asphalt to kind of a rumble strip to kind of make people, to remind people, especially around turns, about speed. And we did a speed study after that. The speed limit was 45 miles per hour in different parts of Creek Road. It is now 40 for the entirety of Creek Road. We are seeing improvements, but people do go fast on Creek Road. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't true. But are stop signs the answer? No traffic engineer that I've spoken with thinks that stop signs are the answer to lowering speed.
But,
Go ahead.
but wouldn't that also mitigate the Google Maps thing? Because people coming in, if it's slower because you got a stop sign or you got a stop light, then clearly the traffic might be rerouted back through 133. I'm just saying, it's a possibility.
I'll call on you in 1 second, but go ahead.
Yeah, we had, I should start by saying I'm not a traffic engineer, and I don't pretend to be a traffic engineer. And we have traffic engineers within our public works department who have done deep dives on Creek Road in ways that they can make it safer. And to put a stop sign in, there's certain standards that have to be met for you to put a stop sign in. And the traffic engineers have told me that none of those metrics are met on Creek Road. And it would actually be a liability for us to put a stop sign in, given national traffic standards on roads.
This is only related, if you are driving in the Arbolada and you're heading towards Miners Oaks and you're on Cuyama there, have you noticed that you get to Del Norte and it's paved where you turn up here, but it's not paved this way? And what I learned from the people who lived there was a traffic study, because that is the official back way, that you don't have to go through town. You probably all know that. I use it too. And they had started off by saying, well, how can we slow down the traffic on that? And they paved it where it turns up here on Del Norte, so people are going to have to make a left at a stop sign instead of going straight. So that part's not paved. But when people then are coming from Miners Oaks heading there, they see that it's not paved, and they move towards the middle. And then they're hitting oncoming traffic that way. And what I learned was it's a project midstream. And so I thought, I definitely want to talk to Lindy and find out how can we move that up to get it where there's some block, because everybody is taking the Arbolada. We all know that because they're avoiding town. Which is, go ahead, please. Back there, yeah, but you're going to have to project and give us the short version.
The short version is we live on Creek Road. The average speed of someone driving past our house is about 65 miles an hour, and that's where those left turn kind of medians are. And everyone on the residential parts of Creek has to cross Creek to get to your mail. So there's no walking access on the entire entire length of the unincorporated road for anyone to get to the other side of the road to get to mail. This is why people want crosswalks. We see campers every single day trying to walk from the campground to the bike trail. And we see them almost get hit by cars.
You know, that's an
So
interesting.
this is why we need some mitigation, so people can get their mail, people stop having their cars rear-ended by drunk drivers, because those accidents don't get reported when
Thank you.
they plow out your fence.
I appreciate that.
Oh, no, you know, the crosswalk, I need to look at the exact area you're talking about.
Middlebury Street.
At Kiowa? Yeah, okay.
Well, you guys, I get on the specifics though, you guys should talk, because
Yeah,
I'm pretty.
because I don't, that's one thing I have not researched, is the ability of putting in a crosswalk there with some kind of a traffic calming flashing device or something.
Yes, that's what
That, you know, let me, if you could.
Right after you
I don't
guys
wanna get in
exchange
touch with
info.
you, but,
Yeah.
you can probably find me online. If you send me an email, I will definitely follow, and I have a business card.
No, thanks.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'm happy to talk with you, to look into that. That's an interesting point.
Let me ask a related one that Ben, you might know the answer to.
Are you sure we can ask more Creek Road questions?
No. This is off Creek Road. This is, Souza Francina brought this up recently, which is, we have lighted walking in front of Westridge and then over by Whispering Oaks, but we don't have it on that Montgomery, and we don't have it across from the arcade. And I saw, obviously we all saw that it's recently repaved. Is that high on Caltrans' agenda, or?
We're working
Yeah,
on that
okay.
with them, yes, we're trying, in fact, we've got a discussion tomorrow on this topic, so,
Great.
actually Thursday on this topic.
'Cause I know that everybody's very eager for that. Yes, sir. Give us the short version.
Short version, Matt, Ron Wilson, thank you for all your hard work recently with the Santa Paula landslide and the Camarillo fire and all of the other fires that we've had. This is, will Nordoff still be the evacuation center during a fire or an emergency? I know it's already listed on the webpage for the sheriff, but there is question that they want to make a decision basically during the event to make sure that it's a evacuation center.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think, like Ben mentioned, it's kind of the default location, but given, you know, what emergency we may be dealing with, what if there's, you know, a fire at Nordoff, or in the hills around Nordoff? It's really all emergency specific where a center is going to be for that.
Let me explain one example.
But Ron, I want to make it short and not so much back and forth,
Real
but
short,
yeah, go.
real short.
Okay.
2023, January, the floods, all the roads were closed. Nordoff was not an evacuation center. They were evacuating from Matilaha Canyon. 100 people, they had nowhere to go. So we need to make sure we work on that.
No, thanks. And what I really believe is that what we are going to work on pretty seriously in 2025 is articulating a lot of that with people like the Fire Safe Council and all that. So let's see, this is kind of there's a couple of really larger ones that I would love to keep talking about. We will only get started here, but when will we start considering the environmental effects of attracting more tourism to our valley? I think that's a serious, broad question. But tell me if you guys disagree, but it's a question that's related to what's our vision for our valley?
Well, can I
Yeah,
jump in,
please,
because
go.
we actually are working on that already,
Yeah.
that's part of our general plan
Right.
update. And so that actually will come back as a draft for the city council to review. So that is coming, I do expect that in 2025, the tourism management element.
And then, so that plan, do I remember correctly, does it say the plan is something like 2040 is what the vision is for, is that what it says on the cover of the piece?
Well, I don't think we put a
Okay.
date on it, but, you know, I would hope that we wouldn't adopt this and it would be in place until 2040. That would really probably be pretty stale. I don't think you want to have a general plan for
Okay.
much more than 10, 15 years.
Got it. This is related to traffic, and let's see, I'll just read the question and see who can answer it. Businesses throughout Highway 33 corridor is being bypassed. It is a wildlife overlay, and we feel we have less representation than the rest of the valley, so someone outside of the valley. Please talk about how the auto zone decision will impact the above. Does that make sense to you guys?
To me, that's
Okay, please go.
Yeah, that's a county question.
Great.
Yeah, how do I boil this down? So historically, there was a rule essentially called, we called it the Ojai rule. It was actually 3 or 4 rules that made up a rule, but the end result of those rules were that it basically stopped any kind of development in the valley, in the Unincorporated Valley, any kind of housing development beyond single-family structures, and it also limited the ability of businesses to operate. If you couldn't get a permit to open a business, if you were going to add one trip, either during the morning peak hour or the afternoon peak traffic hours. So it really limited any ability to bring business in too.
I see.
Obviously, if you were an existing business, you were grandfathered in, so this was only on new businesses, or businesses who wanted to expand. When I first joined the Board of Supervisors, we started getting letters threatening us from state housing trade associations, saying that the residential development portion of the Ojai rule violated state housing law. And our lawyers looked at it and said, yeah, they're right. And we were going back to what the state has done to limit local control on housing development. And so the residential development portion of the Ojai rule went away because it violated state housing law. The business portion of the Ojai rule is still in place. And one business in Oakview, I wish there was a better business doing this, it's AutoZone. They bought the location of where the Hilltop Bar is, right there in Oakview, and they want to open an AutoZone, and they are not allowed to under the Ojai rule because they are going to add a single car trip, either in the morning or afternoon rush hour. So it's 6 to 9 and 3 to 6 are those kind of peak zones under the Ojai rule. And so they're seeking a general plan amendment for essentially an exemption to that traffic rule. And so it's going to be coming before us sometime, I'm guessing in the next 12 to 18 months on whether or not we want to make a larger general plan amendment to allow, to basically remove that Ojai rule to commercial projects. And so that's something that, as we head into 2025, something that I foresee doing a lot of community outreach on. Is this something, what does the community think about this? There's obvious small business and economic impacts that I think are positive, but there could be traffic impacts too. And it's something that that's not a decision I want to make without really doing deep community engagement. It's frustrating for me to see all of those shutter businesses along 33, but yet I see Amazon trucks zooming in by the 100 all day, coming in when we could be supporting local businesses. So I think it's a real discussion that we need to have. But you know, speaking of, I just don't know what the unintended consequences might be of changing that rule. So that's a discussion I want to have in 2025.
And then related to Oakview, can I ask, has there been a study about how closing the side lanes, how that's gone so far?
Caltrans is doing that.
Right.
I have a meeting with them in January.
Okay.
I serve as the chair of the Ventura County Transportation Commission, and the head of Caltrans District 7, Gloria Roberts, is on that commission with me. So we try to meet every month just to talk about issues in my district. And I'm really curious. I know as part of that pilot project they were doing where they did the one-lane closure on each side through Oakview, that they would be studying traffic impacts and whatnot. I don't know what the results of that are yet.
Andy?
Yeah.
That was my question, and actually there was a front side to that card.
Okay.
If I could actually just
give us the short version, please.
Okay. So basically what's happened is when Oakview was narrowed, we have data that shows that that configuration only can support 23 average daily trips per day. We're well above that. So we know as a fact that we're pushing traffic onto Creek Road, Santa Ana, and what I hear you saying is you can't do anything. This is uncomfortable for me to call you out this way. But Matt, I have an email going back and forth with you right now. Maps and Google's, they did reply. You did just send a second email, but the efforts coming from your office
They did not
are...
reply to me, Tina.
Matt.
Well,
you
Tina,
wrote the email.
I don't want to do this kind of this detail thing right
Agreed.
now. But if you give me like a general principle
Sure.
that we can respond to.
We are pushing traffic on purpose from the highway, which we are trying to develop businesses. So out of one side of your mouth, you're talking about,
Tina.
we need to do this for these businesses.
but what I'd love to do
But it
is-
is being
Tina,
bypassed on
there's,
Creek Road, which is
sorry,
a wide
no, I'm
open
sorry.
four-lane.
There's a reason why we
Five people
don't, the
in
reason,
this room
Tina,
talking about
please don't make
this.
me talk over
It's
you.
not
Tina,
safe.
Tina.
Thank you.
Okay, the reason
Thank
why we
you.
usually don't have the audience talk and take the cards
Yeah.
is for this reason. So what I'd love to do is figure out how to have really constructive conversations without accusing people of being disingenuous.
I'm happy to send you the email.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, where are we at on time, Brian?
We are 6:51.
Okay, so, did I see one other question that somebody was having here? Okay, no, good. There's, let's see, there's a few more cards here. So Ben, do we have any, this is related, this is similar to the Oakview closing of the lanes, but the Maricopa Highway there. How is that, what's the deadline for that project? What's the vision there for when that'll be ready and done? And the reason why, I know the Miners Oaks people are like, oh my gosh, this is terrible.
I think you're talking about the ATP
Yes.
project? Okay, great. So the project timeline puts it into early spring, is my prediction on that.
Early spring,
Mhm.
that it would be completed, and then the
Yes.
vision is the bike lanes are on the south side, right?
Right, it corresponds with the rendering that's on the city website. The big question that remains, and this is something that we're talking to Caltrans about, is the connection to the trail over the Y.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to, that's goofy now. If you ride your bike over there, you know you have to get off your bike, you're going this way, you're
Right.
taking a crosswalk, and it'd be so nice if we could just have a simple, like a bike, traffic signal light. I don't know exactly which way it would be coming from, but that's one of the big questions we wanna talk to Caltrans.
Okay. No, that's great, that's really exciting.
Well,
So-
it could be great.
I mean, your timeline was faster than I thought, so that's great in that way. And then there's gonna be a parking lot over at the Besant Meadow that the Land Conservancy is putting together, is that correct?
That has been discussed, we
Okay.
have not committed anything to that, and that would have to be, a council decision if that was going to happen.
Okay. No, I got that, thank you. Cause I know everybody's really eager to be able to make their.
I think the bigger response to that is this is again part of the discussion and working with the school district, we're trying to change, the school decided when this project was approved, when the design was approved, that they didn't want, parking in front of the school. That was the school district's request, and so we are working with the school district to see, could we take a portion of their parking lot and allow for some public parking in there? I don't know, this is kind of the bigger question, but those types of things need to be resolved.
So the rendering can be seen on the city site for anybody who wants it, but I'll put a link on our site when we post this video so they can see.
And
what-
and the plans for the project are out there too on the city website as well.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, and I hope this is just the beginning of many, many more. Short one, go.
Real short.
Okay.
Hey, Matt, you do a great job. Thank you very much for everything. One thing I can ask though, being a chair of the Department of Transportation, can you make available the Caltrans study that shows the amount of cars that come down to the 33 for evacuation out of Ojai and that go up and back and forth? If they have a study, in fact, because we would like to know how many cars, you guys are worried about a couple cars going up Creek Road and up, but let me tell you this. There is way too much traffic already on the 33 from Canada Larga and up, way much more than it can handle. In the event of a fire, a national or a disaster, flood, a landslide, whatever, what's the capacity of that 33 to get people out of Ojai when they need to get out of Ojai? We would like to know that from Caltrans.
Chris is gonna respond.
Fire
Chris
Safe
Stans.
Council conducted a evacuation assessment.
Who did, I'm sorry?
Fire
Ojai
Safe
Valley Fire
Council.
Safe Council.
Okay.
So go to our site, firesafeojai.org, or you can download the evacuation assessment
For the 33?
for all roads leading out of Ojai.
Okay, and how about by the county?
I'm gonna link that onto our site too.
And Stephen, if you're referring to an actual study that you know Caltrans has that for some reason you
Sure.
can't get, let me know. If it exists, I assume it's a public record and I'll help you obtain it.
Cool, because I think it should be associated with the build-out spec on the whole area. How much can the roads actually take, and how much build-out has already happened?
Yeah.
So that's what we would like to know.
We have 5 minutes? Okay, so I know one thing that that the Fire Safe Council is going to be publishing is, at some point, would be live responses to, live meaning road traffic use, like we see on Google and things like that, that would be leading in and out of the valley, so that would be part of our fire response. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, well, I want to thank Matt and Ben for spending time after work, working more. Thanks, guys. I know it's like, wow. Thank you.